I'm Indy Neidell.
And I'm Per from Sabaton.
And this is an all-new, exciting episode of Sabaton history.
The Royal Guard.
Yeah.
From the frozen north they came, fought for founding fathers' claim. It was then their tale began.
When Axel Roos lay on his deathbed at the old age of 81, no, not Axel Rose, Axel Erik Roos, and he died in 1765. When he did, he could look back on a lifetime of service for the Swedish crown. 16 times he had been wounded in battle, and doctors had extracted 9 bone fragments, 4 rifle bullets, and 2 pieces of shrapnel from his body. His long military career had begun in 1700 when he joined Swedish King Karl XII's court as a page at the age of 16. And when Karl went out into the field to make war, Roos followed him, battling for the future of the Swedish Empire at Narva, Klisov, Fraustadt, Torn, and Holovchin. Each time, he was noted for his skill and bravery. By 1707, he was a lieutenant and welcomed into the Royal Drabant Corps, the king's bodyguard, later to be known as Livgardet, the Royal Guard. The Drabants enjoyed the absolute trust and confidence of their king. At Poltava, Roos led a battalion of Swedish infantry into battle, hoping to reverse what was a hopeless outcome. Nearly the entire Drabant Corps fell in the gunsmoke that day. Roos himself was captured, but managed to escape and rejoin his defeated king when Karl withdrew into exile on Ottoman soil. By the winter of 1713, Karl and his Swedes had been guests of the Ottoman Sultan Ahmed III for nearly 3.5 years. Karl had wanted to leave for quite a while, but feared for his safety once across the border, since spies and agents of his mortal enemies, Russia and Poland, lay in wait. And so they remained. For Roos and the Royal Drabants, their compound became a second home, and over the years, tents became a permanent military compound. While their king lived in a large furnished brick house, the men spent their days in the coffee houses and shops of Bender with the locals. And with the Janissary stationed there, the royal guard of the Ottoman Sultan, the Drabants enjoyed an almost brotherly relationship. The Turkish soldiers admired and even revered the Swedish monarch, claiming that with a general like him, they could conquer the world. Ironhead, as Karl was known to them, was a brave, generous, and noble man who understood the hardships of the common soldiers. Yet, while the men enjoyed the extensive Muslim hospitality, both the local rulers and the high officials of the Sublime Porte grew weary of Karl's endless presence. Roos knew little of the politics and intrigues that surrounded them in their exile, but it became clear from the increasingly hostile atmosphere outside the camp that something was up. By 1713, the men were not allowed to visit Bender anymore, and those that did were even arrested. Then, on January 18th, by the order of the Saraskier, the Ottoman Minister of War, all food supplies were stopped and communications were cut. The Janissary Honor Guard was recalled, and all Moldovan merchants and handymen forced to leave. In their stead, a well-armed force of 4,000 Tartar warriors surrounded the camp. In the Swedish Trilogy Part 3 episode, I talked about the siege and the action that follows this. But today, I'm going to go over it from Roos's perspective. The situation grew ever more volatile, and Roos and the Drabants built a makeshift palisade of wagons and barrels filled with dirt. At midday, February 1st, to the sound of trumpets, the thousands of Turks and Tartars marched towards the Swedish camp. 12 cannons and 2 small mortars were brought into position. But they were fired with a minimum charge of powder, and their rounds bounced harmlessly off the walls. It seemed like a sham attack. So when the Turks and Tartars moved forward towards the Swedish lines, the defenders only fired into the air. But this time it was the real deal, and the attackers did not stop. Surprised and overwhelmed by the sudden rush, the Swedes of the regular army surrendered without a fight. Enraged at this sight, Karl drew his sword and cried out, "Who still has the courage and loyalty in his breast shall follow me. We will fight pro aris et focis." He was left with only 40 men against a horde of thousands, yet among his men were 4 men of the Royal Guard, Roos, Karpelan, von Schammer, and Volberg. All drew their weapons and surrounded their king, willing to defend him to the last. It now became terrifyingly serious. Once the Turks and Tartars were inside the compound, they began plundering it. They soon broke into Karl's house through the windows. Insulted by this intrusion of his personal quarters, Karl charged forward, his royal guard at his heels. They clashed head-on with a group of Turks who began tearing at the king's clothes. See, the Saraskier had promised the men who brought Karl back to him alive a large sum of gold. Proof would be his coat. You see? Yeah. The royal guard threw themselves against the enemy. A pistol discharged right by the king's face, burning and blackening part of his face. Roos threw himself over the king, trying to shield him with his body, while the others cut down the enemy. Together, they dragged their king back to the house. Inside, the enemy was looting everything that looked somewhat valuable. The Swedes attacked, firing pistols at close range. Almost instantly, the room was filled with smoke. Coughing and choking, the two sides flew into a deadly brawl. Through the smoke, 3 Turks charged the king. Roos, a pistol in each hand, made ready to meet them. Standing betwixt 3 Turks, both arms raised in the air, sword in the right hand, I shot down the Turk with his back to the door. His Majesty lowered his sword arm and stabbed the 2nd Turk through the body, and I was not slow in shooting the 3rd Turk dead. They pulled the king from the window, just as another assailant took aim. Shielding Karl with his own body, Roos's fur cap was hit by the blast. "Roos," cried the king through the smoke, "is it you who have saved me?" Urging his men to throw the barbarians out of the house, the king ran to his bedroom. He threw the door open and was almost stabbed to death by a startled janissary. Only the quick reflexes of von Schammer, who was able to parry the saber with his carbine, saved the king's life. Karl cut down 2 of his assailants. Then the remaining Turks in the room scrambled out the window. By around 5 p.m., the Swedes were once more in possession of the house. They barricaded the doors and windows, took the weapons that were left by the attackers, and kept firing. Karl himself distributed the remaining bullets to his men and sniped from the window with a carbine. Roos remembered. By now, the king was bleeding from the nose and cheek. A lobe of an ear was missing. A bullet had nicked him. Left hand was badly sliced between thumb and forefinger, had warded off a Turkish sword by grasping the enemy blade bare-handed. The Turks changed tactics to get the Swedes out of the house. They rolled burning bales of straw against it and shot fire arrows into the thatch roof. Karl, with Roos and Volberg, ran up the stairs into the attic. With rapiers and muskets, they tried to break the burning shingles from the roof, but the situation was out of control. Back on the ground floor again, the king asked for a drink, but water was long gone. His men had resorted to drinking wine and brandy to quench their thirst. Karl, who had not touched a drop of alcohol in 13 years, drank a glass of wine. Now the house was beginning to fill with smoke so thick they could barely see their feet. Many lost heart, urging the king that it's better to give up than to burn alive. Roos, on the other hand, knowing the king's reluctance, said, "Wouldn't it be glorious to die with honor, with a rapier in hand, and in the middle of one's enemies, than to stay and burn alive?" Karl is said to have immediately praised his royal guard for their bravery and promoted Roos on the spot. As the roof began to collapse, they pushed the main door open. Each man fired his pistols towards the attackers before drawing his saber. In his tent, the Saraskier received Karl with all the politeness and apologies he could muster. It was, of course, all a misunderstanding that had led to the fight and the tragic, unnecessary death of men.
Sword protectors of the throne, royal doctrine set in stone for the crown. You shall give your life.
All the surviving Swedish army and Karl's royal guard had been taken prisoner and dragged into Bender barefooted and in chains. They were stripped of their valuables, their money, even the silver buttons from their coats. The Tartars that surrounded them were now dressed in ill-fitting hats, pelts, and wigs, and embroidered uniforms. But although the king's treasure had been looted, Karl was in a pretty good mood. Despite having his eyebrows burned off and a deep cut in his nose, his guard had prevented any further harm from coming to him. So Karl sat on the Saraskier's couch as if he had just won the great victory and the roles were reversed. And you know what? In a way, they had indeed won a great victory. The story of the Kalabalik at Bender, as it was soon known, crossed Europe's courts like wildfire. It was a sensation, a story of heroism and sheer insanity, exactly the kind of feat that was typical for Karl XII of Sweden. All eyes were now on Karl, and any further attempt to silence or betray the Swedish king was now out of the question. Satisfied with the outcome, Karl fell asleep, still wearing his torn and bloody clothes. The Kalabalik at Bender, the story of how the Swedish king and his small band of warriors defeated an army, fascinated contemporaries and was soon elevated into legend. The pressure of international diplomacy soon got the Swedish soldiers released, and Karl eventually made his journey back to Swedish soil. Roos and the Drabants remained by their king's side, and their ranks were slowly filled as war beckoned once again. Roos himself was appointed adjutant general in the Skånsk cavalry, taking part in top-secret and very hazardous missions on his king's orders. He was also there at Fredriksten Fortress in 1718, where Karl XII met his fate. But a royal guardsman remained loyal to the Swedish crown until his own death. And for the rest of that century, men like Axel Erik Roos embodied the traditional Karelian hero. He became a romanticized idol of the Swedish youth, who dreamed of performing soldierly feats like his and experiencing great adventures. Many tales and poems were written about his life and the royal guard, who, like at Bender, remained true to their vow to protect king and country, no matter the cost. Hey, Per, I can't help but notice your tri-corner hat and the glass of wine there. Now, these are symbols that we've seen in your recent videos, and you did 2 videos for what is in essence the same thing, but it's not the same thing, because they're different songs, but the Royal Guard and Livgardet, which we've now done episodes about both of them. Can you tell us about how that ties together and how...
Right. Yeah, of course. I mean, musically, the song ties together.
Yeah.
Obviously, they are represented in the 2 different languages, Swedish and English.
Yeah.
And the story tells very much about the Swedish Livgardet or the Royal Guard going through. However, the music videos is tied more than a lot of people could imagine. I mean, we made 2 videos for them. One, where for the Swedish song Livgardet, when we were sitting and having a lot of glasses of wine.
Okay, I have to say, this is one of my favorite of all Sabaton videos throughout ever Sabaton videos. First time I saw this, I love this.
And
Maria
I can
too.
say it was one of the most fun to create because we get to eat and drink a lot.
Yeah?
So that's not so common.
Yeah.
Normally we get dirty and we get to, you know, dig in dirt and
or Bismarck.
fight.
He's standing on a freezer. Oh yeah, we were in the desert for days. God.
We were in the desert as well. But for Livgardet we were eating and drinking. And we enjoyed that. But actually, the timeline is opposite. So, first of all, in the timeline, the skirmish at Bender, where we are filming for the song The Royal Guard, and we are fighting to defend the imaginary king in kind of a imaginary Bender version.
Right.
And we get all bloody and stuff.
Yeah.
And then we are going to the castle to eat and plan for future conquests and defenses of the country of Sweden.
Yes. Wow. I never watched them back to back like that and stuff. So if somebody watches them back to back, would you suggest they watch Royal Guard first?
Yes.
Then? That's kind of cool. So remember that. So now you've got homework. A complete side note that I just got reminded of. In an interview I did recently, there was a question. The question from me is, name something that you've done in life that you will never do again. And my immediate answer was, go to the Sahara Desert with Sabaton.
Oh.
Because I will never do that. I love you guys. I love the music, but come on. I mean, I'm glad I did it. I'm glad we had that trip. And yeah, I enjoyed the video, and like Mehdi's really cool, and the people we were working with were cool, but the Sahara itself,
It's not cool.
Yeah.
It's super hot.
Yeah.
But I did enjoy it.
No, I mean, every single thing there wants to kill you. The heat wants to kill you. The sand wants to kill you. The bugs want to kill you. It's fun turning the light off in your tent. Cars want to kill you. So, but it's fun, you know, turning the light off in my little tent thing. I'm like counting to 10 and then turning it on, and there's 100 things on the floor, and all of them are poisonous.
Yeah, you know how it is to come home when you are like maybe a kid and you want to look under the bed and look for the monsters under the bed, and you have a flashlight, and then you turn on the flashlight under the bed, and there is no monsters. There is no monsters.
Yeah.
But then you go to the Sahara Desert and you live in a tent, and you look under your bed and you think that, is there a monster there? And you look there, and there is a monster.
There is nothing but monsters. You're like, wow, is that a scorpion? Is that a flying scorpion? Is that a flying scorpion under my bed? What are the odds? Well, yeah, no, but I mean, I'm glad we did it, and I'm proud of what we did, but I'm not doing it again. So, well, I say that now.
You say that now. We have the plan for the return of...
For the return of Lawrence of Arabia. No, but I mean, that's a different video and stuff. But I know we're getting sidetracked because I wanted to ask you about this. Whose idea and when did the idea come to do both the Swedish and the English and to do this again? I mean, you did a whole album like that, but you haven't exactly repeated that since then.
No, that's true. I mean, it came very natural. I mean, are we doing a song about Swedish history? Yeah. We are doing it in Swedish, and obviously we are doing it in English as well because we want to cover so that everybody can follow.
Yeah.
So that was it. But and that's also pretty much the answer to everybody else is asking, when will you do another song about Swedish? We will do it when we have Swedish history next time.
Okay. Well, and that note about Swedish history, why don't we say goodbye for today's Sabaton History Channel episode. Say goodbye, Per.
Goodbye, everybody, and see you soon again.
We will see you soon again. We won't be seeing you every week, but we will see you soon again. So do not forget to subscribe and click that little bell thing so you know when new episodes of Sabaton History come out, because there will be plenty more.
Thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing. Please remember to click that little bell so that you get updates and notifications once we release new episodes. Jak się masz?